There is a moment between death and rebirth that defines everything that comes after. Not your birth, not your life choices, not even your death, but within the moments that immediately follow it. And what's strange is, almost no one ever questions what happens there. We are given a story long before we ever recall experiencing it. A quiet certainty, repeated in different forms across cultures and time, that when the body falls away, something appears. A light, a presence, a sense of peace, a feeling of being guided somewhere. And because it feels comforting, because it feels familiar, we follow it without hesitation, without question. What if the experience we have been taught to trust the most is also the moment where we are the most vulnerable to being misguided? The moment where perception can be shaped, where direction can be given, where a choice can be made before we even realize we are making it. Gnostic Christianity and other religions and esoteric traditions speak of Earth as a trap, prison, or illusion. The Buddhists speak of samsara, the cycle in which souls constantly reincarnate. Today, we explore the concept of the reincarnation trap and how to escape the cycle of death and rebirth. You die. And for the first time in what feels like an eternity, everything becomes still. There is no body, no pain, no sense of weight or limitation. Your consciousness has shifted. There is only awareness, floating in a vast and silent expanse that feels both unfamiliar and strangely intimate at the same time. Then slowly something begins to emerge. At first it is distant, almost imperceptible, a soft glow forming within the darkness. But it grows, expanding into what appears to be a tunnel of light, warm and inviting, pulling you forward with a quiet but undeniable force. There is no fear in this moment. In fact, there is a sense of peace so profound that it feels like you are returning to something you have always known, as if some distant part of you recognizes this light even before you fully understand what it is. And as you move closer, you begin to see figures taking shape within the light. They are familiar, loved ones who have passed on. They appear whole, radiant, filled with a kind of presence that feels more real than anything you experience in life. They greet you not with words, but with a direct knowing, a communication that bypasses language entirely. And the message is clear. You are not finished. You need to go back. For most people who have come close to death and returned, this moment is described as beautiful, comforting, even sacred. It feels like being welcomed home. It feels like truth itself. But what if this moment, the most comforting moment imaginable, is also the most important decision you will ever make? Because across cultures, across continents, and across decades of documented near-death experiences, the same pattern appears again and again with remarkable consistency. People describe leaving their bodies, moving through a tunnel, and encountering a radiant light, meeting beings or loved ones, undergoing a life review, and ultimately choosing to return. There is an almost mythic quality to this repetition, as if it echoes something far older than any modern account. A memory that does not belong to a single lifetime, but to consciousness itself. The idea of being drawn toward a light that feels divine appears again and again in ancient traditions, often not as a final return, but as the beginning of a descent. The consistency is striking, and consistency can suggest a structured process created by design. And that is where the questions begin to deepen. Is this simply what happens when consciousness separates from the body? Or is this something we are being guided through, step by step, in a way that feels natural because it is meant to feel natural? The presence of loved ones is perhaps the most powerful element of this entire experience, because in a moment of complete vulnerability, when identity is dissolving and reality itself feels uncertain, what could be more grounding than seeing the faces of those you trust the most? And yet, some researchers and thinkers have begun to ask a question that is deeply uncomfortable. What if these encounters are not exactly what they appear to be? This does not necessarily mean they are malicious, nor does it mean they are false in an obvious sense. But if consciousness can be influenced, if perception can be shaped, then the form that guidance takes would likely be something deeply familiar. Because if you can guide someone in that moment of profound confusion, you do not need to force them. You only need to lead them. Following this encounter, many describe the life review as an experience so vivid and encompassing that it defies ordinary understanding. It is not simply remembering one's life, it is reliving it. The pain you cause is experienced as if it were your own. For many, this is described as profoundly meaningful, even transformative. It is often framed as a process of learning, of growth, of understanding the consequences of one's actions. But there is another way to look at it. Because embedded within this experience is something very specific, a realization that things were left undone, a sense of guilt for the mistakes that were made, a feeling that there is more to fix, more to resolve, more to complete. And from that realization, a decision begins to form, a choice to return. Not because you are forced, but because out of guilt, you feel that you should. And this is where the mechanism, if it is a mechanism, becomes incredibly subtle. Because a system that abides by the law of free will and relies on your choice does not need to impose anything upon you. It only needs to guide you into a state where the choice becomes obvious. Long before modern science began documenting near-death experiences, ancient traditions were already attempting to map what happens after death. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there are detailed instructions given to the dying, guiding them through what is described as the bardo, an intermediate state between death and rebirth. Within these teachings, there is a warning that feels strikingly relevant. The soul will encounter lights of varying intensity and quality. Some will be brilliant, others dim, but not all of them lead to the same destination. It is said that some lights draw the soul back into another cycle of rebirth. The instruction is not to blindly follow what appears. The instruction is to discern, to recognize, to choose consciously. In early Christian Gnostic texts, such as the Apocryphon of John and the Pistis Sophia, we encounter a worldview that is even more radical. These writings suggest that the material world is not the ultimate reality, but rather a constructed one, a kind of layered system, maintained by intelligences often referred to as archons. In the Gnostic texts, the archons are described as malevolent beings that maintain the system that keeps consciousness cycling within a limited reality, also known as a reincarnation trap. In this framework, the human soul is not native to this system. It is something divine, something originating beyond it, but caught within it, cycling through repeated lifetimes in a state of partial amnesia. Within Pistis Sophia, there is a striking narrative that feels almost like a symbolic mirror of this entire process. Sophia, an aeon whose name means wisdom, turns her attention toward a radiant light she believes to be the light of God. Drawn by its brilliance, she moves toward it, trusting what she perceives. But this light is not the true fullness of the divine. It is a lesser emanation, an imitation, and in following it, she descends into lower realms where she becomes imprisoned in a system and world of matter. There, she is diminished, fragmented, and caught within cycles of imbalance, calling out repeatedly to God for restoration and release. When viewed symbolically, her fall begins to resemble something deeply familiar, a consciousness drawn toward what appears to be truth, only to find itself within a prison structure that feeds off of its light. The story of Sophia raises a subtle possibility that even something which feels illuminating, revealing, and emotionally undeniable can still exist within a layer that is not the ultimate truth. That the feeling of truth and the reality of truth are not always the same, and that what draws consciousness forward is not always what sets it free. In the Gnostic tradition, Sophia is not only the one who falls, but the one who realizes who she was before the fall. Her liberation comes through recognition of the truth, and in that sense, her story is not just a warning, but an instruction. In the 20th century, a different kind of exploration began through the work of Robert Monroe, a man who dedicated his life to understanding consciousness beyond the body. Through his famed out-of-body experiences, he described encountering something he called loosh, a subtle energy generated through human emotion and experience. In Robert Monroe's Far Journeys, loosh serves as a universal fuel and building block used by higher dimensional entities. Monroe described Earth as a garden or farm, specifically engineered to produce this substance. And while he did not describe the system as inherently malicious, he suggested that human life, in all its depth and struggle, was part of something that extended beyond the individual. If that idea holds any truth, even metaphorically, it raises a profound question. What kind of system would sustain itself on the continuous production of such energy? A cycle of reincarnation would be the most efficient answer, a loosh farm. This idea that human experience generates energetic value within a larger system is not entirely unfamiliar. It has appeared even within modern storytelling. In films like The Matrix, humanity exists inside a constructed reality, unaware that their lives are part of a system maintained by an unseen intelligence. The machines in that story do not control through force alone, but through illusion, creating a world that feels real enough to never be questioned. And within that system, human beings serve a function. They generate energy, not through intention, but through simply living within the experience itself. When viewed symbolically, the parallels become difficult to ignore. The archons described in Gnostic texts are said to maintain a system of illusion that keeps consciousness cycling, unaware of its true nature. And Monroe's description of loosh suggests that human experience produces something of value within a larger framework. The Matrix brings these ideas into a modern visual language, portraying a world where perception is engineered and where participation in that world sustains the system itself. Some modern remote viewers have attempted to explore what lies beyond death and Earth. While their findings are not universally accepted, there is a recurring theme in some of their accounts. They describe not chaos, but structure, not randomness, but process, a cage surrounding the Earth which keeps souls bound and tethered by gravity. An energy where souls being called to their true home rebound back to the earthly plane. Taken together, these perspectives do not prove anything definitively, but they do open a possibility. That what we experience after death may follow a sequence: the tunnel, the light, the reunion, the review, the choice, and then return. If this is true, even in part, then the question becomes far more personal. What will you do in that moment? Because across traditions, there is a quiet thread that suggests awareness changes everything. Not reaction, but awareness. Not assumption, but discernment. The recognition that you are not obligated. That no presence, no system has inherent authority over your consciousness unless it is accepted. This begins with something simple but profound. The ability to pause. To not move automatically toward what appears. To observe, even in the presence of something that feels overwhelmingly real. Because not everything that appears luminous is necessarily the highest expression of truth. And not everything that feels like home is where you ultimately belong. Another idea is the act of reclaiming one's energy and memory, becoming whole rather than fragmented and disoriented. This again means taking the time to discern and facing the fear of stillness. But perhaps the most difficult aspect is the release of attachment. Because what draws us back may not be force, it may be love, or something that feels indistinguishable from it. And if the pull toward the lesser light mirrors Sophia's pull toward what she believed was divine, then the question becomes even more subtle. Not whether something feels true, but whether it is truly the source. And if loved ones appear before you, asking you to return, the pull becomes almost impossible to resist. Thus, the pull beyond, to the greater light of the source, must be recognized as the true light. Which raises a question that only you can answer. Would you blindly follow the first light you see? Or would you ask what lies beyond? Some suggest a simple act in that moment, a clear declaration of one's sovereignty, not of resistance, but of clarity. Mentally seek the Creator, the God of your heart, and ask to be shown what is real. Beyond all systems, beyond all constructs, and perhaps most importantly, to remember. Because if there is a moment where awareness determines everything, it is this one. If awareness is what determines the outcome, then it is not something that can be improvised in a moment of death and disorientation. It must be developed now, while you are still anchored in the body, while you still have the clarity to observe your own mind and question your own perceptions. Many traditions across cultures and time have emphasized practices that seem to prepare consciousness for precisely this transition. Meditation in its deepest sense is not simply relaxation, but the gradual disentangling of awareness from thought, identity, and sensory input. It is the process of learning to remain present without reacting, to observe without immediately believing, and to rest in a state that is prior to form. In that sense, meditation becomes a kind of rehearsal, not of death itself, but of what remains when everything else falls away. And beyond the quieting of the mind, there is a deeper recognition that begins to emerge. That what you are is not confined to the body, not limited to a single lifetime, and not defined by the identity you carry here. What you are is one particle of a whole. The sense of separation dissolves, and what remains is something vast, something indivisible, something that does not belong to any one place or time. It is a sense of oneness with all that is. What you are is not merely a participant in this system, but something far larger than it, something that is not limited to this planet, this lifetime, or even this solar system. And if that recognition stabilizes, even briefly, it begins to change the orientation of the mind. It is a moment of cosmic consciousness. Because what seeks to return to the earthly plane after death is often the part of humans that still identifies as small, as separate, as incomplete. But what remembers its own vastness does not seek to re-enter something it no longer feels bound to. For it has outgrown the earthly material plane and seeks the next phase of evolution. In that sense, preparation is not only about discernment, but about remembering what home actually is. Not a place you are guided toward, not a light that calls you forward, but a state of being that is already whole, already complete, already free. Lightening your karmic load is also advisable. This means being a good person, recognizing the Creator in every being, friend or foe, choosing to dwell in a place of love and light, so that if there is a life review, you can be proud of the decisions you made. There are also traditions that speak of cultivating a relationship with God, the higher self, or the Holy Spirit. Whether these are understood as aspects of one's own consciousness or as external guides, the principle remains the same. Familiarity matters. Recognition matters. If there are presences encountered beyond the physical, then learning to trust and discern their quality now, while grounded, may become essential later when the stakes are far greater. This is not about blind trust, but about developing a sensitivity to what feels vibrationally coherent, what feels true, what feels aligned beyond emotional pull. There is also the question of attention itself, where it rests, what it follows, what it identifies with. Because in many ways, life is already a continuous series of small decisions about what we move toward and what we move away from. And if that pattern continues beyond the body, then the habits of awareness we build now may carry forward in ways we do not fully understand. In that sense, preparation is not about fearing death, but about becoming more conscious within life, more aware of thought, of emotion, of impulse, of attachment, more capable of pausing before reacting, more capable of seeing clearly without immediately moving. Because if there is a moment where everything depends on awareness, then that moment is not separate from the moment of death. And perhaps the way you live now is already determining what you will recognize then. At the same time, it is important to acknowledge that there are other interpretations of reincarnation that suggest it is not a trap. In the traditions of Hinduism, the cycle is not maintained by force, but by forgetting. The soul does not return because it is captured, but because it still believes itself to be something it is not. This is a trap of our own making, and liberation does not come from rejecting the system, but from seeing through it entirely. From this perspective, what binds consciousness is not an external structure, but identification itself, the belief that you are the body, the personality, the story unfolding in time. And as long as that identification remains, the cycle continues naturally, not as a prison, but as a consequence. Many researchers, spiritual teachers, and individuals who have had near-death experiences interpret the light as a return to something profoundly benevolent, something that is not trapping consciousness, but welcoming it. The life review in this view is not manipulation, but compassion. From that perspective, reincarnation is not imprisonment, but evolution. And it is possible that both perspectives hold pieces of a much larger truth. But even within that uncertainty, one thing remains constant. Awareness changes everything. So when that moment comes, when the light appears, when familiar forms reach out, when reviewing your past mistakes, pause. Not in fear, but in clarity, and ask, what is true? Because the answer to that question may determine everything that follows. Will you choose to reincarnate on the earth plane of your own free will? Or will you move ever closer toward the true light of the one infinite creator? As always, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe for more. Namaste.